Hey Scream Therapy listeners. As you might imagine, doing the Scream Therapy podcast over the past year and a half has been emotionally heavy and a lot of work. Now that the podcast has reached 40 episodes, I've decided to take a break for a while so I can come back recharged. But fear not, during Scream Therapy's absence, I'm bringing you a spin-off podcast. It's called Flex Your Head. Each episode, I dissect a classic punk album with one of my dear friends as a guest. This episode, I bring on my friend Mike Isacson. Mike and I met a few years ago at a punk rock show on my friend Carlos's goat farm, believe it or not. Mike's the bass player and singer in Victoria, BC's Crashing Into Things. Him and I once spent 9 days together on a tour. If we survive that, we can survive anything. Welcome to the second episode of the Scream Therapy spin-off podcast, Flex Your Head. Here we go. Flex your head! Hey Mike, how's it going today?
Good, man. How are you?
Oh, I'm pretty good. So what album are we talking about today?
We are talking about Nomeansno's classic Wrong.
Right on.
Have you heard the news? The dead walk. You hear that sound? You hear that sound?
Okay, so Nomeansno's Wrong came out in 1989. It was their fourth album, widely considered to be their best. And I'm just wondering the opening thoughts on this album. There's a lot to handle here.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of the album, I just have to go back to being, 16 or 17 and trading some of my hockey cards for some cassettes that a guy that I worked with dubbed onto tape. Gave me some great music, but man, just hearing that, knowing that it was some local guys that had made it and how incredibly good it was. For me, that's definitely kind of top three for the most impactful albums on me in my life, I would say.
I remember getting the cassette as well, and I don't know how I got it or where I got it. I used to be a huge collector of cassettes, and I had hundreds of metal cassettes. So all thrash, all death metal. I rarely had anything that was outside of that genre, maybe some hardcore stuff. But for some reason I had this album, and I remember just thinking, what the hell is this? It's so weird, and this isn't even music, Of course, grew to love it over the years. I was reading Martin Popoff. I don't know if you know him. He's probably of Canada's most famous metal writer and reviewer, and he gave it a 10 out of 10 in his Collector's Guide to Heavy Metal. He said Wrong was the mightiest merger between the hateful aggression of punk and the discipline of heavy metal.
Yeah. That kind of sounds like a metalhead trying to pull it over to their side. It's heavy. It's heavy.
I think it's a fun record, really. I mean,
well, they're a fun band.
To me, it's a party record, really.
a party record for those
Misanthropes
experiencing extreme existential angst. Yes, yeah. But that's kind of what No Means No is, right? It's taking all the futility of existence and saying, well, what the fuck? Let's have a good time.
Words like jazzcore and prog punk and math rock. I don't know if you can really describe them. I mean, sure, you can put these words together and say that's what they are, but there's no other band like this. And Wrong was an album that really solidified what they were doing.
Yeah, I mean, all those terms that people like to apply to it, but really it just sounds like No Means No. I know I was reading, they had said that Wrong was kind of a deliberate departure from Small Parts, which was more proggy, longer songs. They were just like, let's make some shorter tunes, just kind of more conventional songs and put it out there. So I don't think they weren't thinking of it as their magnum opus, and that still to this day it seems like none of them think of it as that. But the public and the No Means No fans, Wrong is generally the number one album by consensus. Yeah,
I guess I'd have to rate it there. There's a couple close ones. I love Small Parts.
Yeah, Sex, Mad, Mr. Happy, and Wrong are my three.
Yeah, I think so too. We'll talk about some of the songs, actually. The whole album is amazing. All the songs are great. I think my favorite song on the album is The Tower, because it's so dark and brooding, but it also just churns along. Mm-hmm. Can you think of a favorite song off the top?
Rags and Bones, which is kind of their all-time number one hit, I guess. That's just such a great song. I love I Am Wrong, which didn't even make it to the original vinyl, only was on the CD. Yeah, end of all things, all lies, two lips, two lungs, one tongue. It's catching up. Those are my favorites.
So basically the whole album.
Yeah. About half of it. The other half's great too. Of course, it's catching up. Is I know Dave Grohl has it on.
Let's not talk about Dave Grohl. Let's just skip that part. So you're a bass player, and
Yeah.
obviously Rob Wright is, one of the all-time great bass players.
Oh,
Do you know
yeah.
anything about the rig that he's using? I think it's just one of the best sounds. It reminds me of Lemmy from Motorhead. I'm not sure if Rob uses the
Yeah.
same kind of bass, but
That basically, yeah, that was the inspiration. Was Lemmy's sound, but it's a Marshall rig. He plays a Fender, so I'm not a total gearhead. I remember reading that he would go through a lot of basses because he would sweat so much, just rust everything out. But yeah, it's a Marshall rig, and it is modeled after Lemmy's tone. My two god bands back around 16, 17 was No Means No and Husker Du.
yeah.
And I didn't listen to Motorhead much until the last few years. And listening now, it's like, holy shit, that's a Husker Du song. You just change the lyrical content, and that's a Bob Mould tune right there. Yeah, No Means No. That's where the sound came from, and the inspiration.
I just want to put it out that I really hate the song Big Dick. I've never liked that song. I mean, not just because it's stupid lyrics, but I just don't like the way that song flows to whole ba 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 da.
It's funky. You don't like the Minutemen though, right?
I do like the Minutemen more so in the last couple of years. I never really got into them too
Okay.
much back in the day, but yeah, I mean, I'm growing to love them.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that No Means No was inspired by all these bands?
Everything I've read, no. It's
Yeah.
like they came up with their own thing.
Yeah.
I have kind of seen, Rob Wright sort of or Rob and John laugh off the thing that they were like inspired by the Minutemen. It's like, no, they were just coming up at the same time. That definitely wasn't like they weren't sitting around listening to Minutemen records and going, ooh, let's do this. They come up with their own thing independently. And they never got to play together either. I was just reading. They did play with Firehose a few times. And I know Mike Watt is a big fan, and I'm sure vice versa.
I always like albums where the singer just at random points goes, yeah, and then the song keeps going. That's one of my favorite things. And Rob does that a lot on this record.
Yeah, those stop and start breaks, my God.
Lyrically, again, lots going on, some sort of playful stuff, well, as playful as they can get, and some real twisted stuff.
It's very cheery and optimistic. The end of all things, all lives.
Yeah. I think my favorite line on the whole album by far is, well, Christ was married on the cross. My father was married to my mother, and I am married to a cigarette butt lying in the gutter.
Well, Christ was married on the cross. My father was married to my mother. And I am married to a cigarette butt lying in the gutter. I am married to a cigarette butt lying in the gutter.
When I first heard that when I was a kid, I was like, whoa, cigarette butt in the gutter? Classic.
So you don't remember how you got introduced to No Means No in the first place? You just ended up with the tape?
I mean, I used to buy tons of tapes, buy/appropriate tapes from our local chain record store. And I don't know if it was just because what I used to do is I used to buy it based on the cover. So I came home one time with a King Crimson album. I was just super disappointed because it was not thrash metal, right? You know the one. So I don't know why I would have bought this with the cow on the cover. I mean, it doesn't look like a metal album. Maybe a friend gave it to me or something, like you were saying, kind of came across it. And I didn't really listen to it. I was kind of like, this is weird. It doesn't sound like Death Angel or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
obviously later on got into it hard when I discovered more of the punk bands.
I think kind of hearing that heavy lead bass was startling, because nothing else sounds like that. I had an older sibling that was part of the early Victoria punk scene. And so, they knew the guys, but I was never introduced to that. I never went to any of the shows back in the day. I only got to see them 3 times, kind of like in about the last 5 years that they were going. I remember trying to go down to see a show at the Rat's Nest, probably around 93. And by the time we got there was like a line of 100 people. Yeah, there was no way. But,
more people that can actually fit in the Rat's Nest.
Yeah.
More people in line. Any songs that stand out on Wrong lyrically that come to mind right away?
I just like the lyrics. I like Rob Wright's lyric writing, period. I mean, you'll often see it come up that how big a fan of James Joyce he is. And I actually poked around on that. The only thing I came across was this Alan McInnes, the writer in Vancouver, his Alienated in Vancouver blog spot touched on W.B. Yeats's influences. Because Rags and Bones, like there's a Yeats poem, The Circus Animal's Desertion, that ends with the line, the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. And then Yeats also has a poem and as well as a collection called The Tower. So I'm going to guess that he was reading a lot of W.B. Yeats at the time.
For one more second, I see a woman. She's holding flowers, a bouquet of roses that are blood red. From a burning building, a man leaps to his death. I stand above these mansions of the dead, red tombs, and above us looms the tower, the tower, the tower, the tower, the tower.
It's an interesting thing, I'm a lyricist as well. With poetry, there's an absolute freedom, especially, in modern poetry, you can write whatever you want. Things don't need to rhyme. With songs, things tend to need to be more concise. Rhyming can be very useful. And, within that context, that's a challenge in its own right. Man, Rob Wright's just one of the masters of it, and, saying so much, just a few descriptive statements, like the lyrics to The Tower, the looming,
The red eye.
yeah, the surveillance state.
Couple that with songs about big dicks, and
Yeah.
it's not like all the songs are one tone, like a Slayer album or something. It's very much all over the place, and
No, for sure.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and the shared songwriting too, Andy Kerr wrote 3 or 4 of the songs, and they're fantastic as well. So, and that also kind of helps mix things up a bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Tulips Too Long is a fantastic song, and that's his.
Did you read about how Rob Wright had some problems with his throat on the first 2 albums,
It's
and
not
then
surprising, is it, listening to what he's doing to his poor vocals?
on this album he was able to come back and do more lead vocals?
Yeah, I guess he does lead on about half of it, right? You can tell the difference between the two, but it's also not a huge disparity. So I remember back in the day, who's doing vocals on which? I kind of have an easier time telling now.
One of the best drummers ever.
John Wright, who has been your drummer as well. Oh, he's unbelievable. He really is. Yeah.
The drum rolls at the beginning of the
Yeah.
album is just, yeah. And I always wondered if he's doing some vocals as well, because he did the Hanson Brothers, he sang in that.
Mhm.
Sounds like he's maybe popping in here and there with the higher pitch.
You should ask him, yeah. Yeah, I think he probably is in there. I think he's credited for some vocals, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The female vocals on The End of All Things, it's a woman named Danielle Gagne. And I was curious about her. She does an amazing job. It's a beautiful song. Her vocals are fantastic. As an aside, I Googled her, and it looks like she's had a very cool career. She's a multidisciplinary artist. She didn't ever record anything else. She's got no other recording credits. But she's still singing, involved with choirs and stuff, and doing art therapy as well in Vancouver. So
Nice.
anyways, that was kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Mark Critchley was credited as Orchestra Bells, and he was in a band called Itch out of Vancouver.
Right.
So they didn't really have a ton of other people that sang as guest vocalists over the years, I don't think. So that's pretty cool.
Count Jello.
Yeah, on a whole album.
Yeah. Great album.
I told you about how it's Andy that's wearing the cow mask on the cover.
Right, yes, yeah.
I always thought it was Rob for some reason. It's got the priest.
Yes, that's right. Which came back later with Mr. Wrong. Yeah. Anyone who's, not aware at this point, of course, the very title of the album, Wrong, is a pun. It's the big Wright brothers pun. And then later, that would come up more with Rob Wright's solo Mr. Wrong thing, and there was Mr. Right and Mr. Wrong.
I didn't actually get that until recently because I'm a dummy sometimes.
That cover art, I was thinking, would make a wonderful cover for a dual volume of 1984 and Animal Farm. It's got a good vibe off both of them.
Totally.
Pretty appropriate, I think.
We talked a little bit about memories around the album. Do you have any more memories that you can share?
Just remembering being, say, 16, 17, and just how hard the album hit me. Not getting to see them live, but again, just knowing that they had been local. They were over in Vancouver at that point. They inspired so much, around the world, but certainly the Victoria scene. A couple of years later, I got to walk in and watch Pigment Vehicle playing live at Harpo's, and then Pigment probably being the best of the really heavily Nomeansno influenced bands locally. Pigment were a fantastic band, and they just completely blew me away. As you know, being up in Pella River, you're a homeboy with John Wright. He's a little north of you, but he's got the pub in town there. There's kind of a community that has certainly been nourished by the Nomeansno connection, right? Colin from Pigment Vehicle is up in Pella River too. John moved up there with some of the old Victoria punks. That's helped create this aspect of the community up there, and that spreads out too. I was wondering, like, would you and I know each other without knowing Snow?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, right?
It's interesting too because John's been up here for a long, long time as far as having his property out in Lund, which is north of Pal River, kind of the end of the road there. There's references to Lund and stuff from way back in their liner notes.
Yeah.
And I'd heard stuff here and there about him being here, but until meeting some other friends of friends to even realize and make that connection. And then, like you said, he was drumming in some of our jams and stuff, which is really fun and weird being in front of him and looking back. Okay, John's drumming and I'm here doing my thing, and really, really weird, but super, super fun.
Pell River Punk Jams existed for several years. Played, I don't know, at least probably 20 shows.
Yeah, something like that.
It was a free for all. Whoever was partaking that night, other bands on the bill or whoever was in town would be playing. And John Wright drummed for you many times.
Yeah, no, that was great.
Yeah, our guitarist Adrian, I know after he got to join in one of the punk jam sessions, he said at the end, that he could die happily now that he played with John Wright. So
we have a friend, Nelson from Nelson, and he came up for a trip, and I threw him on stage with John, and he was just ear to ear smiles. But that's a testament to these guys as well. And Wrong was a record that definitely changed a lot of people's lives, but they were never the kind of people that would be like, oh, we're the guys that did this. Heard about them on this tour going and playing a show somewhere back east, and they played with some hardcore band, some band that brought a lot of people in, and then Nomeansno played last, and there was nobody there. People all left after the hardcore band, and they were super gracious with the promoter, and they were just happy to be there. And I mean, that's just who these guys are. And I think the interesting dichotomy is this really dark, intense music and the really nice folks, and that's pretty common in punk and metal. It's that yin and yang thing. I usually go online, and this is wild, but I actually like to read the YouTube comments. I know it's supposed to be something that you shouldn't do.
No means no, it's okay.
For sure.
I think I saw one negative comment.
I grabbed a couple. So this is by Sleuthed, and they posted 4 years ago, and they say, 2 years ago, I was wearing my Nomeansno shirt, and I randomly passed out while on my stairs and nearly gave myself a concussion. Went to the ER, and they did an EKG to see if it was the heart thing. In came a dude covered in tattoos who saw my shirt, and we talked about punk. He knew of Nomeansno while he put electrodes on my body. I was fine, by the way. That one gets me.
That's a good one.
This one is from Evenberg 6 years ago. I hand shook the drummer for some time ago, and Johnny Wright has the warmest, most comforting hands in the universe.
One strong memory of Nomeansno I have, being about 20, in my old band, and my bandmate and I would go and hang out at Scott Henderson's place. Scott was a Victoria legend, old friend of Nomeansno from way back, and Scott's been in some great bands himself. He was in Show Business Giants with Tom Holliston from Nomeansno.
And Hissanol as well with Andy Kerr.
That's right, Hissanol with Andy Kerr. So, very strong Nomeansno connections. And we would just go over to Scott's place sometimes, and he would expose us to new music, like, amazing Japanese folk music and things like this. We hadn't called to say we were coming over, so we just walked through the door, and this was at his old studio in Colwood, the Sea of Shit, and the sound coming from the other side was like, oh my God, Nomeansno is in here recording right now. Like, you knew that was Rob Wright playing bass on the other side. Must have been demos for the Worldhood of the World. And I know Scott's credited as an assistant engineer, recorded in Vancouver. So like I said, I guess it must have been demos. I'm not sure, but wow. That was, you're hearing that bass on the other side of that door. Man.
Did you read any of the sort of goofy news postings? Obviously all made up.
Oh, like on their website?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The website's hilarious. Yeah.
It's got to be Tom Holliston, because this is Tom's humor for sure. But going back to a post he did in 2009, Nomeansno to record Wrong. Nomeansno's seminal sophomore effort, Wrong, so not sophomore, has long been a fan favorite and the band's only gold record. But very few people realize that it was actually originally conceived and recorded as an Andy Kerr solo project with drumming provided by Show Business Giants mainstay Scott Henderson. However, label pressure courtesy of Jello Biafra and his main henchman, Greg Workman, forced Kerr to pull a Tony Iommi and release it under the far more marketable Nomeansno banner. Initially, Andy wished to call the project Quicksilver Incarnation. Since John, Raul, and Rob Wright have spent years touring and playing many of the songs from Wrong, they felt that it was time they recorded the album with the sound they have become famous for. Bay Area thrash as done by Canadians. If you have time, anybody out there has time, this stuff's just hilarious. He's probably written 30,000 words on there of just these urban myth tomes.
Yeah.
So Tom Holliston, of course, came in after Andy Kerr left the band and played guitar after.
Mm-hmm. It is also a local resident of your region there, right?
They're all gravitating towards this area. I'd like to say it has something to do with me, but I was in Victoria during that whole time that I came here, so I came back and realized they'd all moved here. But anyways.
I asked Scott Henderson if he had any good anecdotes about Wrong. He said nothing specific except that when he first heard those songs played live, it was one of the greatest musical experiences of his life. Scott's had a lot of musical experiences, but yeah, you can imagine.
Yeah.
You're going to play some new tunes tonight. Here comes Rags and Bones. Holy shit.
They recorded that Live and Cuddly live album on that same tour, which I love.
Mm-hmm. Europe was where they caught on. I was reading an interview with Rob or John, and they'd said that there was a time when the three big North American punk acts for Europe were Fugazi, Bad Religion, and Nomeansno. They were the top of the pecking order for playing festivals and things. And of course, they got to play the closing slot at that, Roskilde festival in Germany or somewhere over there. Sepultura had a conflict, so they couldn't play, so they went on after Peter Gabriel to 60,000 people.
Wow, that's amazing.
When I saw them here, the club that's had a million names under the Strathcona district or whatever, I guess about 10 years ago. I think it was like a Thursday night. I mean, it was full, but it was also just like, God, here's one of the greatest bands of all time playing in their hometown. They should be playing to thousands of people, not a few hundred back in here. But
I saw them in Seashelt. My friend Jamie put on a show for them, and we were there setting up. And, Seashelt's almost as hit and miss as Pal River as far as getting people out. Jamie was a really amazing promoter. He would do everything to get people out. I was there thinking, okay, no means no. Do people really know who they are here? And sure enough, it was just packed. There are names so widespread to the point of probably being DOA and them are kind of very close in recognition.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
You can put on a show in any little place and people are going to come out, except for Port Alberni.
That's right. As we know, Don't bring DOA to Port Alberni.
No, I'll never do that. Who would ever have that idea? Any final thoughts?
This album has meant a lot to me. I mean, obviously, as someone who ended up being a singer/bassist from a Victoria band, how could anything be more impactful than having one of the all-time greats from your hometown and being able to be somewhat connected to it? I did ask John to produce one of our albums, but then he was like, well, yeah, I'm interested, but I might be buying this pub. And sure enough, he did buy the Wildwood Pub in Pell River, where you can all go pay a visit to the great drummer himself.
It's not uncommon to have people come and do that. I know people have come from all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
He's basically the tourism department at this point.
That's right. Get the German tourists coming over.
Of course, you're inspired by Rob's playing. Was there things that you could take from that?
I think it's more the willingness to have the bass as something of a lead instrument.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone would listen to my playing and go, oh, that sounds like No Means No. I haven't gone for the same tone. I play finger style, so it's different. I don't know how he writes, because, I write with just bass and vocals, and lyrics, and then let everybody else compose around that. The fact that he did Why Do They Call Me Mr. Happy, and he's playing guitar on it too. And I know when I've read, he's kind of like, basically like, the guitar is not that great. Sounds pretty great to me. Like, that's an amazing album. So just a really talented guy, yeah.
I got to mention the song, which is a bonus track on the CD called State of Grace. I just love that song. I think it's just him playing bass and singing on it. No other instruments. And it's just, his voice is so good. It's soulful.
That's a very heartfelt song. One more thing too is just, the fact that they left off what is essentially the title track to the album, I Am Wrong. It didn't make the cut for the vinyl. It made it onto the CD. It didn't make it to the vinyl. I mean, I don't know what the decision process was like for that, but I Am Wrong is such a great song. And I remember there was a guy, Randall Lawrence from Organized Chaos back in the day, who was at the time that I knew him, was in the classical program at UVic. And we were hanging out and I was like, oh yeah, no means no wrong. And he was like, yeah, he says, oh no, like it's I Am Wrong, like, those discordant harmonies on the chorus. And I didn't know what he was talking about because I hadn't heard that song, because the tape that I had was just a dub of the vinyl and I didn't have the CD yet. So I'm like, what's he talking about? A song that I don't know? So I went out and got the CD, and then it's like, oh my God, this song's amazing. And yeah, just those incredibly wrong harmonies on the chorus.
So anything that you want to plug at all? Anything that you're working on? Or
I want to plug the book that our friend Jason Lamb is working on about Nomeansno. I'm not sure exactly when that's going to be coming up, but I know he's made good progress on it. Check in on publication date or anything. Hopefully maybe next year that'll be coming out. And a lot of work has gone into that. Been able to talk to all the members of the band. He's drawn from all the resources, all over the world. That's going to be an amazing book when it comes out, and any Nomeansno fan's going to want to have that.
It's on PM Press, which is the publisher out of the States, owned by Ramsey Kanan, who is the owner of AK Press. So I think he was saying there's quite a bit of photos and trivia and all that kind of stuff in it too. So not just a basic book.
I did ask him if he had any anecdotes about the album that I could share, and he said he couldn't think of anything, but also that he was going to save it for the book if he did. So,
boo.
Yeah. Alternative Tentacles is supposed to be reissuing. I don't know if they've got the rights to everything in the catalog, but that's supposed to be happening soon.
Fingers crossed it's going to be all of the albums.
Because it's expensive.
We have to start saving up our pennies so we can buy all the reissues.
Used Nomeansno vinyl is
Impossible.
Going for a lot. Yeah.
Do you want to mention the band at all?
Oh yeah, I've got a band called Crashing Into Things, but who cares about that? We shut down for a while, but I'm getting it back on its feet slowly here. You think I'm really going to plug my band? Like, oh yeah, go listen to Wrong and then go listen to us? Yeah. No, listen to Wrong, wait, listen to shitty music for a week, and then go listen to us. You might think we're okay. Yeah.
All right. Don't forget to listen to the Scream Therapy podcast, which is the podcast I do about punk rock and mental health. I've got 40 episodes. This is the spinoff, doing this for a little while I recharge my batteries. ScreamTherapyHQ.com. Scream Therapy HQ as in headquarters. No one really gets that. You can go there and check out my podcast episodes, my other projects, my writing. Thanks so much for doing this, Mike. It was really fun. And
hey, thanks for having me. Yeah.
You're the guy that I wanted to talk to because you and I share so much about Nomeansno, and I know how much you love the band.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this has been a lot of fun. And yeah, I kind of dove in, doing a lot of reading up and listening over the last couple of weeks, getting ready for this. It's definitely going to fuel me more playing music as well. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Take care.
You too.
Yes, sir. No, sir. Fuck you, sir. Is that good for you? Flex your head!